Pardon my supposed tardiness this week, but sometimes life puts in an appearance with things that create a wandering. We'll call it a wandering that take us to places we hadn't anticipated, or maybe places we'd anticipated, but not exactly when we may have anticipated them. There's a unique set of circumstance that the celestial formation currently is placing upon us a zone of large or larger significance than the day-to-day dance that we do with life here on Earth might not allow for our becoming aware of. And what I'm talking about are the three outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. Now they've been kind of interacting in close proximity to trines and sextiles with one another for a while now. As we began this week, a couple days ago, because it's Wednesday today, Venus moved into 4 degrees of Virgo, which put it into a square aspect with Uranus. Maybe before we get there, and that's just, it also as well was sitting at the focal point of a yod between Pluto and Neptune, bringing their focused energy onto that Venus in Virgo. Now, what is a yod? Finger of God. Now, what the heck does finger of God mean? Well, not to get too philosophical yet, I am inclined to lean in that direction. The two planets that are in sextile to one another, Pluto and Neptune, they're speaking to each other in a more or less cognitive sense where they get the dance of the energy that they are a part of. One being the Pluto in Aquarius. What is the experience that I came here, this is Pluto talking, to transform in the realm of group consciousness or the collective group energy? And Neptune in Aries is basically tapping at the hem of unlimited consciousness in the context of birthing something new. Aries, the seed process that is, under the soil, perhaps not necessarily knowing what it is that is going to be birthed, but willing, on a very large context, Neptune, to trust in that process of this new birth or initiation of a cycle. The last planet, the Uranus, down there in early Gemini. All these planets at 4 degrees of each of those signs. So there's there's an energy, and the 4 degrees of Virgo, which is where Venus is basically at the focal point of that yod with Pluto and Uranus and Neptune, has such an intense focalization of that Pluto-Neptunian energy in the Venus way of how is it that I can most effectively, Virgo, be cognizant of what it is that is coming from a little further out, a little beyond this everyday living experience that we're dancing with, that I can bring into my interaction with others. Where's the value that can be gleaned from a perspective that, some may say really doesn't care so much about the nuts and bolts of the everyday living experience that we're all participating in, because there's a larger context, and large in what sense? Is it a length of time that is being considered? Perhaps that is the case. The Sabian symbol for that Venus at 4 degrees of Virgo. A man, you could just as easily say a woman, a human, becoming aware of nature spirits and normally unseen spiritual agencies. Can you feel in that perhaps a tap on the shoulder, if you were, coming from those 2 outer planets, saying, are you willing to grow out of the contagion of that everyday experience that you're a part of to such fashion that you see a deep and expanded expansion of potential, that as a soul being you're here to embellish. The keynote for this place of Venus, the opening of new levels of consciousness. Now, I'm generally, even as I say that, I have an inclination, and the inclination is to push maybe a little harder at the limits or the parameters of a context that could be trying to contain, if you were, a percolating spirit that, from the perspective of these 3 outer planets, don't easily mesh or fit into the everyday matrix of what it is that we see and are steeped in as trying to find our value within What is it that I woke up today to do? And this, what shall we call it? This soul field, which is always present, but just waiting there for the opportunity for that everyday pull of this, dance we're doing on the surface of Earth experience to relax enough to recognize its presence. The soul field. The three outer planets, not generally tied into that everyday dance that we're doing, but asking larger questions as to what is it that we're really about? Is it simply to be born, live, and die? It does seem a little shallow to put it in that fashion. There is a larger context. The Venus that began this week in square to Uranus, the closest of those three outer planets, has a Sabian symbol. I'm going to read the Sabian symbol for all the outer planets, all sitting at 4 degrees and forming a beautiful, let's put it on the screen. This isn't the beginning of the week. This is Wednesday when I'm actually sitting down doing it. But look at this. Pluto in sextile to Neptune, in sextile to Uranus, in sextile to Jupiter. Yes, we will be getting to Jupiter. And Venus up here in square to that Uranus. The fact of this, look at it. It's a beautiful sextile bowl with 2 trines in place, an opposition between Jupiter and Pluto. This particular aspectual dance that we're going to be invited to as we end this week, actually it's already underway, is this is an enormous energetic aspect. The Sabian symbol for that Uranus, a revolutionary magazine asking for action. And Uranus, Prometheus, the great awakener, what kind of action do you think that it might be querying for us currently? And the keynote, the explosive tendency of repressed feelings and root emotions. That's some very intense energy. And this is in square to the Venus as we began this week. As we get over to our Aries dance, Neptune, unlimited frontiers of creativity in the sign of Aries that percolates with impulsive levels of action. But this is not necessarily in your day-to-day dance that you're doing. This is happening, perhaps from a Neptunian Piscean perspective internally. But at the same time, how aware are you of the soul field awaiting your awakening? That's what Neptune, this outer planet version of this life dance is waiting for you to awaken to. And the Sabian symbol reads, a triangle with wings. The keynote, a capacity for self-transcending. Can you feel that? Do you sense that there's a potential of this living experience that you may be overlooking? That these transpersonal planets, all in conversation with one another at this time, or perhaps singing just a wee bit louder with their conversation between them, in the hopes that you will hear the transpersonal message asking you to step up to this life dance with a version of who you are from your soul field perspective that has been waiting for you to tune into it. Pluto, the great transformative planet there at 4 degrees of Aquarius, with a Sabian symbol that reads, a council of ancestors is seen implementing the efforts of a young leader. Might we be due for some of that energy? Well, I'm going to give you a spin on that perhaps you hadn't considered. But first, the keynote for that Pluto. A root foundation of past performances which power and sustain whatever decision is made in a crisis by an individual. There's a tone sounding. It sounds all the time, but there are moments along this, what should we call it, waves of life unfolding, where we're being asked to listen just a wee bit more attentively to sounds or energy frequencies that we wouldn't normally be aware of. This is one of those times where the soul field, which is basically there sitting always with an invitation for our participation with it, to wake up. Prometheus, Uranus, the great awakener, the revolutionary, excuse me, possibly, and maybe likely, creating a deep, stirring restlessness within our souls that says that there has got to be a lot more to being alive than has been sold to us, trained into us from our first breaths in this incarnation dance. To be born, to live and pay our taxes and then die is so shallow for the use of our heart, not just our bodies, not just the brain trying to fit in to this version of the life dance that we've been offered as this is the way it has to be. I don't think so. Yeah, I told you. I may zip off into my philosophical side, and rightly so. And part of the reason is this Jupiter, the philosopher planet, the teacher of the zodiac. As we go through the week, you kind of see it down here. 3 degrees of Leo. And then we get to Saturday. You guessed it, 4 degrees of Leo, opposite Pluto, in trine to Neptune, in sextile to Uranus. And in Leo, the symbol for Leo. This is from Dane Ridger's The Planetarization of Consciousness. The traditional symbol of all creative beings is the appearance of a dot at the center of a circle. That's the symbol for the sun. But before the dot appears, there is really no circle, only nothingness. And yet this nothingness is to be understood as the infinite potentiality of every imaginable thing. The sun rules Leo. Jupiter's energy upon entering into Leo is in true Leonian fashion trying to always make everything it touches expand, grow into a larger version of what it's touching. And Leo, the solar desire to present a self, because it is, after all, underneath that central line of the zodiac, the self, as opposed to the collective, is, driven by this solar desire to find an audience, to test, if you will, its version of understanding upon others. Because it wants to, in true solar fashion, stir things up. See what others' version of this life dance is about, and does it resonate with others in such a way that they might, present you with accolades, or at least a resonant understanding that says that you're on the right path, going in a direction that's meaningful. Well, this particular Jupiter, forming this beautiful pattern here, which is a pattern of conversation, trines and sextiles, these energies are not challenged by each other's perspectives. They are an invitation, if you will, to continue forward. And what we're talking about is that outer transpersonal perspective that, in one sense is way more than what we are normally inclined to think about. Where you can almost sense that there could be discomfort in how we perceive our individual life version of this earth incarnation. And this particular aspectual pattern, currently from these transpersonal planets, are attempting to awaken us to a perspective that we don't normally have the opportunity to tune into with this much of a tailwind. Jupiter, it's touching that tailwind as we end this week in Leo, that version of self-expression, solar self-expression, is being invited into a larger, and shall I say it, soul field that has always been there waiting for us to awaken to it. Something new in this moment has the potential of, grasping our attention. And it may not transpire in our, daily commutes on the rail or our time spent in coffee shops. I'm talking about something potentially inside of each one of us that has the capacity to awaken a part of us that we have slept through. That right now is tapping our hearts, our soul field, attempting to get our attention. And what might happen as Jupiter in Leo joins into this chorus of potential? You might be surprised at what it is that is invited to transpire in that Leonian Jupiterian outward expression, seeking some sort of, what's coming back to us from that space that is trying to awaken within our hearts right now, that has never possibly had this particular configuration to work with. I don't even know how long, but I do know that this current moment is really the only moment that matters. And you have to ask yourself, am I awake? Is my understanding of my soul connection being given enough audience to, from a Plutonian perspective, transform how I interact in my group of collective other beings that I participate with? And from the Neptunian perspective, is what it is being birthed through me carrying enough perspective, creative perspective, to not necessarily try to predetermine what is being born, but be willing to allow Spirit to be the instigator of that birth? And Uranus, is it awakening in me and others an opportunity to revolt against what is keeping us from discovering that unique spiritual part of the being alive process that is going on right now. That's all I'm going to do as far as the astrology goes. And I could go a lot further into it. My philosopher side of myself is, it's excited right now by the potentiality, as Dan Ridger would put it, of awakening aspects of my being, of our being, into sharing zones of creative substance that have just been waiting for us to wake up to, and to create a far better world to live in, where true creativeness is not just about one-upping someone else, but listening to one another. It is an irony of ironies that we happen to still be in the Mercury retrograde cycle, and hopefully you've been practicing with trying to, listen more attentively to what it is that not only your heart is saying, but the heart of others. This Mercury retrograde in the sign of Cancer, it has the opportunity of being an invitation to the ancestral linkage that we each and all carry from wisdom that has been gleaned down through the ages and comes to focus in the only place that those ancestors have the opportunity to speak, and that is through the current moment, through us. What is it that your ancestors that lived and died very well might be tapping you on the shoulder and saying, by the way, did you know that? Fill in that blank yourself. Your ancestral linkage has answers for you that no one else has. There's a uniqueness in what it is we're being invited into at this moment. So that's all I'm going to have for today. And I'll try and see if I can get online a little earlier next week. So many things transpired over the last several days that kept me on a treadmill that, wasn't necessarily wrong or inappropriate. It just didn't provide me with the clear enough space to be able to sit down and share with you the substance of the current celestial conversation that it would behoove us to pay attention to. See you all next week.